if we look at like our emotions and our feelings, that's usually what's coming up for most people when they're eating and they're not actually hungry. It's this ability to distinguish whether we're hungry, bored, tired, or experiencing any other emotion. And a lot of people are so uncomfortable with riding the emotional wave. They think that the wave is going to be a typhoon and like wipe everything out.
So they make it out to be one then.
Yeah, when in fact it's actually like a 3-foot wave that will pass if you give it enough time. So what do we do with that time? So that's where the like behavior change and modification comes in. It's like, what are we doing that's productive within that time? It doesn't have to be working out. It could be doing Sudoku. It could be calling a friend. It could be like, I don't know, walking on a treadmill like Beth, you're doing, or I'm doing, like Matt going for a run. Right. So it's hard though, because what it actually teaches you, you have to sit with the feeling.
Right.
Like you have to give it space to actually pass.
Welcome to Cut the Crap with Beth and Matt, the world's #1 no bullshit health and fitness podcast.
Are you ready to cut the crap with your diet and exercise, get strong as fuck, and build a healthy relationship with food? Then you've come to the right place.
Let's go. If you'd like to support us and the podcast, join our Patreon where you get exclusive content, which consists of monthly workouts you can do at home or at the gym, monthly challenges that are either strength, habit, or mindset based, and access to over 100 plus low-calorie, high-protein, family-friendly meals. These are all designed by a professional chef who is certified in nutrition. These recipes are already in MyFitnessPal for easy fucking tracking. New recipes are also added each week.
We believe that fitness is for everyone, so this is our way of getting you started on your health and fitness journey at a price most everyone can afford. So what the fuck are you waiting for? We'll see you in the Patreon.
What's up, Chris?
Nothing much. Just living life. My son's asleep right now, so if he wakes up, I might have to grab him.
Okay.
Because kids are the best.
How old is your
Kids are
son?
the absolute best. Our youngest is 8 months old. My oldest is 4. So he's at school right now.
Right on.
Which means he's probably laying on the ground doing nothing, but he's at school. At least that's what we say. So
I honestly can't believe that your baby is 8 months already. I feel like your wife just had a baby. It's just how fast time flies on my end. I'm sure it's different on your end.
No.
Time really does fly though.
It does.
In that way.
It's going incredibly fast. And yeah, I mean, if you ask my wife, she's like, no, he was just inside of me. It goes so much faster. And now with 2 kids, it goes even faster.
I bet.
Because it's like we consistently like look at this tiny baby, and then we look at our toddler and we're like, oh, I remember when he was that size. Wow, that wasn't that long ago, was it? And then you're like, no, it was. It was like 3.5 years ago, or like, and you're like, oh my God. So it's a good thing. It makes us kind of try to slow down a little bit when we can, at least.
Be present.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Yeah.
So you guys, we have my friend Chris McMahon joining us today. So Chris and I, we chat a lot via DM on Instagram. We've gone live together. We've been friends via the internet for a few years, I think.
Yeah.
Right. And so yesterday he messaged me and said, I'd love to chat about food addiction with you. Are you down with that? And I'm like, yes, let's, because it's been a topic these days because we've been talking about the Surgeon General's warning with the alcohol. And of course, I've been posting about that, Matt, and I'm not sure if you have, Chris, but the comment sections seem to bring out the whataboutisms, right? Let's jump from one subject, which we're talking about alcohol, and then we're going to jump to the next one where people are like, well, what about the food? It's the food's addicting too. Food is just like a drug. And in my mind, you cannot compare food to drugs, okay? I understand people struggle with food, but it is not drugs. So we're going to chat with Chris today, and we're just going to go talk about it. Let's talk about it.
Talk about it. Hey, you, come here. I want to talk to you.
So if you want to just introduce yourself first, Chris, and tell us a little about yourself.
Yeah.
So
my name is Chris. I've been working as a coach for over a decade now, but I specialize in fat loss. I work with a lot of fat loss clients, strength training, all that jazz. I'm actually in pursuit right now of my Master's of Science in Nutrition and Dietetics. And in 2027, I will be a registered dietitian. So I like to think I'm kind of learning a lot about this sort of stuff and how to interpret a lot of the data while I'm trying to go through this. And also a lot of my clients, like, from like a behavior standpoint and everything, there's a lot of like psychological work that goes into this, and you guys know that it's well beyond like just calories when it comes to making any sort of change. And Beth, I don't know, Matt, if you're a part of this club, but we're both a part of the we can't drink because then we're really not fun to be around party.
I'm not officially part of that club, no.
Okay. Well, glad to not have you. But you know, it's interesting when people talk about addiction because there's so many different versions of addiction, right? You could be addicted to anything. You could be addicted to porn. You could be addicted to caffeine. You could be, there's so many different versions of it. And TikTok. You could be addicted to social media. You could be whatever it is. And because it all hits that like dopamine, right? We get that dopamine hit. But I've just found it so interesting when you were talking about it the other day, because you put up like that story and I like messaged you. I was like, this is so great. Like you were like snorting a cookie. And I thought it was fantastic, but I could only imagine how many messages you got about that, because people probably were like, well, that's ridiculous, or that's not true. Like I have a cousin who only drinks Mountain Dew and I can't get them to stop and they're addicted. And it's like, there's more nuance to this conversation, right? You know, when we actually look at it. And yeah. So that's kind of like a little bit about me and a little bit about where my head is at with this whole idea of food addiction.
That's cool. First of all, it's awesome to hear that you're going back to school for your master's in dietetics. That's going to definitely like give you a really unique perspective with the experience that you have 10 plus years training and working with clients in that way. So we need good people like that in the nutrition field. So that's awesome, man.
I know.
Thank you.
Super awesome. What was I going to say? So with, let's say, food addiction, is food addiction a real diagnosis? Like, could somebody actually be diagnosed by a dietitian, a doctor, having food addiction? And what would the criteria be for having a food addiction? Because when I think addiction, especially when you say food, that's so broad. You know, when you think about it, like, okay, are you addicted to Brussels sprouts, broccoli, salad? Probably not. So how can you say you're addicted to food?
Yeah,
I don't know. I'd love to dive into that.
And add on to that too. I think we would all agree to this. And the argument Beth and I like to give is like, you need food to survive. How can you be addicted to that which you need to sustain you, right?
And maybe I'm thinking, okay, there's the physical addiction and then there's the behavior addiction. Okay, so you can't be physically addicted to food, can you, Chris?
Well, actually, it's really interesting. So there's a whole rating system for this, which I was completely unaware of. Because up until this point, like the research around food addiction hasn't been that great. Like there just hasn't, it's been mostly in animals and stuff. And that's when usually people will quote like, well, they gave rats a bunch of sugar and it completely changed their personality. But in actuality, they created something called the Yale Food Addiction Scale. And the reason why they created this is because the person wanted to be able to look at this a little more in depth and be able to understand this. So food can actually be addicting. Usually those foods are hyper palatable foods. It lights up the same part. It does light up the same part of the brain as like alcohol or cocaine or any sort of hard drug. But like anyone can consume those foods and doesn't necessarily mean they're going to have that response. And there's a lot that goes into this. So it's frustrating when someone says they're addicted to sugar or something, because it's like, no, you're not addicted to sugar. You just enjoy that. But if someone actually did have any of these flags, they would take this sort of questionnaire, and it's usually given in a clinical setting, but they have a modified version now that's only 11 questions. The clinical one is about 25 questions. And what it does basically is it asks you a series of questions. If you've ever done Precision Nutrition or did their certification, they have the modified version as a resource that you can actually look through and see some of the questions. But it takes a look at your relationship with food over the last 12 months and basically asks you, like, have you coped by eating this food? Have you done this? Have you done that? And it's really questioning around foods that are like chips, ice cream, cookies, cake, white bread, rolls, trying to think about it, like soda, energy drinks. It's looking at those sorts of things because those are the things that people usually go to, because you're 100% right. Someone with a food addiction isn't necessarily going to go and eat a fucking sweet potato. Like that's not going to be the thing they go. And they're like, well, I have to eat a bunch of sweet potatoes. Although I'm sure in some extreme case, there is someone who would do that.
Right.
And what they actually found in one of these meta-analysis, which was pretty interesting, they did one in 2024 where they reviewed all these research studies that have used the Yale Food Addiction Scale, and they actually found that it is very reliable. Because what we can actually happen is a lot of individuals, because this is a self-reporting questionnaire, will be like, yes, I do eat a lot of this. But those individuals who are answering that way usually are the people who are already dealing with eating disorders. So the highest prevalence of food addiction is actually found amongst individuals with binge eating disorder, bulimia, anorexia. Those are the individuals where you actually will find the highest case of this.
And I would agree with that.
Yeah, and that makes sense.
That's where I kind of start getting upset on when people call themselves addicted, say they're addicted to food. It's like, you don't have it. Like you're like, to me, it's making light of real mental health diagnoses, which kill every year, one leading cause of death. And I have a big issue with that, you know?
Yeah.
So I want people to start using the correct words and terminology, I suppose. That's my stance.
Yeah. So that's like the thing. It's like those people are self-reporting, and it can be skewed because they already have a warped view of how they actually are consuming. And the other interesting fact is a lot of these studies are only done or were only done or used, meeting the parameters, were female. So there weren't actually a lot of studies done with men as well. There were like 2 that they were able to include. So you have that sort of like bias as well. So we don't really know on the
Well, you think about food addiction. I mean, that's typically, it's not men that are saying they're addicted to food, right?
Oh, yeah.
So,
yeah,
especially in our line of work, we know that. Yeah, I hear you there.
Yeah. So if you answer really high on this questionnaire, like the higher your score, the more likely you have a food eating disorder. Like you just have there's like a lack of willpower, but there's a true addiction. And when people aren't consuming these foods, or when they try to like go cold turkey, they actually do experience something similar to someone who removes smoking. They will experience mood swings, headaches, lack of energy. Like they can have all of these weird, I won't say weird, but all of these actual like similar things to someone who like removes smoking. So it can be an actual addiction, and it's important to recognize that. But 99% of people who say they have a food addiction don't have an actual food addiction. You would know if you did. It's something that you can actually see. It's something that you would actually know. And these individuals who have it they're usually obese, like for the most part, unless
my 600-pound life or something. People that are literally 1,000 pounds and need a fucking crane to get out of their house.
Yeah. So you would actually be able to tell from that regard usually, but other people dealing with eating disorders, you won't necessarily. There's the other extreme where they're very malnourished. So you have that extreme. Like you have these 2 extremes. So someone in the middle who's enjoying a cupcake and is like, oh, I'm so addicted to sugar. You're a fucking idiot. No, you're not. You know, that's kind of how we can look at it in that regard. The other interesting part of this is people who tend to have high food addiction rate. It's usually because there's technically, like, totally arm sharing this, but from what I've read, it's usually that they have a family history of addiction. They have some sort of emotional regulation issues.
That addictive personality, addictive trait.
Personality. Yeah. They basically have some sort of trauma in their past that they're trying to deal with. So it kind of does fall in alignment with other addictions, where it's usually not the addiction itself. It's usually something that's causing that addiction to happen, to nurture. It's a learned behavior. It's just that for these individuals, they already have like the perfect storm of addiction tendencies. And that's why there's therapy that specifically focuses on this. That's why something like GLP-1s are actually a really big help for individuals like this, because with food noise and with these addictive tendencies, they actually find that shuts down. So it's easier for them to start to make these changes.
Brings them back down on the level playing ground.
Yeah. And they've even found like time restricted feeding works well for this. Health promoting behaviors work well for this. Talk therapy works well with this.
In what way does time restricted feeding work for
they found
food addiction?
Yeah.
Would this mean like intermittent fasting?
Yeah, technically, like in some of these studies, but it wouldn't necessarily be like, okay, you have to skip breakfast. It would be literally like, hey, from this time to this time, this is when you're going to eat. These are the meals you're going to, it's something where they probably are going through some sort of food therapy. It's being highly monitored.
So it's a controlled clinical Yeah,
Yeah, because there's a lot of other food deficiencies when this is happening as well.
for sure.
You'll see a lot of individuals. If I've coached individuals like this, and I'm sure both of you have, where like they're eating like 20 grams of protein for the day, and they're over 200 pounds. They're eating like 5 grams of fiber,
Yeah.
and it's like,
And
yeah,
then
of course.
and then they're saying they're they're afraid of carbs. They're not eating carbs. It's like, well, what are you eating?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
You're not eating enough protein. You're not eating enough carbs. You're not eating enough fat. What are you eating, right? And you see
yeah.
that a
So
lot too. And you mentioned this already, the malnourishment. Totally possible. You can absolutely be malnourished in a larger body. We see it
Oh
all the
yeah.
time.
Yep.
Just
Yeah.
like you can be malnourished in a smaller body. They're not mutually exclusive. So just for anybody listening, really.
yeah, yeah. There's a lot of these deficiencies that you see in these individuals, and there's
Mhm.
also there's actually like a food addiction anonymous group that follows the
Mhm.
same steps as the 12 steps program. So it's very much a real thing. The percentage of people who have it, when they look at all of these studies, it's about 14% of the average population, which kind of falls in alignment with folks who drink alcohol. Like if you look at
Mhm.
the whole thing, about 14% of the population will deal with alcoholism or addiction in general. So it's kind of interesting in that when you look at it that way. But again,
Yeah.
it's a slower process. Like
Mhm.
someone could go out, drink, get drunk, crash their car. Someone who does cocaine could try cocaine for the first time. It could be laced with something. They could OD. Same thing
Yeah.
with heroin, whatever other drug. Where food, like you said, like no one's ODing on cookie
Mhm.
dough. Like that's
Right.
not what's happening. That's why food, I can't consider food a drug. I just
That's what I'm
can't.
saying. Like, I think
Yeah.
my whole
Which is how it
point
gets
is food
compared. And this
isn't a
is how we get
drug.
to this conversation.
And I
Yeah.
never said food addiction wasn't a real thing. I just said food isn't a drug. And that's when people go batshit. It's like, no, but food is my drug. It's like, but it's not a drug.
Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
using it
When
as
you're
a means to
and
cope.
you're giving it control and power over you in that
Right. And I
situation.
think
And that's where we get it and like stop it.
yeah, like people's words matter and how they talk to themselves and how they label themselves. If they only knew that if you started talking better about yourself and you started identifying as someone that's actually not what they are identifying at,
Yeah.
they can actually move towards healing.
Yeah.
Chris, have you read Dopamine Nation?
No, never read it.
Highly recommend, because I tell you, that book actually helped me start changing my mind on how my kind of stance on food addiction a little bit. And I think Beth and I probably would agree on that because we talked about
Yeah.
this book a lot on this podcast.
Yep.
It's exactly in alignment with what you're talking about here, Chris.
Mhm.
The reward centers in the brain, how how those work, and the behaviors, and just like
Yeah.
with what Beth was also just saying too. Like if you continue to paint yourself in this person that has no power and no control, you're going to continue to have no power and no control. If you
Right.
continue to be the victim of the fucking food, you're going to continue to be a victim of the food. So I was actually curious too. Do you know how any like that one group you mentioned? Do you know like how some of those that group in particular works? Because I don't know officially, but I know I've worked with a lot of clients that have done things like Overeaters Anonymous.
Yeah.
And when they come to me and talk to me about it, they're like, "Oh, I couldn't eat this with Overeaters Anonymous." I'm like, "What the fuck are they
Right.
doing?" Like, no,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
human psychology 101. You can't tell somebody not to eat the thing.
Yeah. I think the Food Eaters Anonymous and food addiction, I think they're two different groups. From
Okay.
what I could just see on here because I had no idea it was a thing. It said that it follows the same like 12 steps.
Mhm.
Yeah,
So
that
if
would
it
be
follows the same,
OA, like Overeaters or OE, Overeaters Anonymous, OEA.
yeah. So this is FA. So I'm not really
Okay.
sure the approach that they take with it, but it is interesting what you said, like that idea of like feeling disempowered because of
Mhm.
everything, feeling like you have no control. One of the things that's most interesting if we use like the topic of like calorie tracking, one of the things is like you could easily be like, well, that's going to cause like disordered eating in someone. And it's like, no, it's not
inherently,
necessarily,
Right.
not inherently. Depends on the person, just like this. Like it depends on
Yeah.
the person and what they're eating.
Mhm.
But for the person who in a past, like I've had clients who have had disordered eating and they've gone
Mhm.
through therapy and then they're cleared by their therapist to go and work with someone like me. And we will track stuff if they're okay with it. And when they
Mhm.
are okay with it and they do track, they're actually like, holy crap. Like,
Yeah.
wow, I can choose to do X or Y. I, in the moment, can stop and ask myself, do I actually want this right now? Maybe
Mhm.
I do want it, but I'm not actually hungry. Can I save it for later? And
So they're
suddenly
applying that
when
mindfulness to it.
yeah, when you're actually able to like stop and make that choice, a light bulb goes off and suddenly it becomes, oh, wow, no, I actually am in control. Like I actually do have this ability. Am I going to be like perfect at this? No, you're fucking not going to be perfect at it ever. But you're that percentage of time where you feel disempowered starts to decrease. And eventually when those moments do happen, you're like, okay, well, what can I do differently next time? And you look at it in this more, I don't know, this more kind of playful, like figuring things out way, but it takes time. And a lot of people don't like hearing that. They don't like that it takes time. They wish it was
trial
like
and error, and you're gonna fuck up, and yeah. And it's kind of the same way with like using the scale can be triggering for a lot of people. And maybe when they take a step back from it and learn how to use it in a different way as a tool rather than a fucking gauge of your moral compass and your emotions, right? And you take and look at it as just being data and logic, and you can take the emotions out of it, then maybe they can go back to using the scale. Maybe not, but some people can. So it's same situation.
Yeah.
Sounds like you kind of take a mindful eating approach too with like some of your nutrition stuff. And that's really interesting. I love that because that's what we do and we talk about it all the time. So you're really going to have that perspective of personal training and coaching and the dietetics and the mindful eating. Because I do see that a lot too. Like not everybody applies the mindful practices to nutrition and to movement. You've already kind of alluded to that too.
Yeah, I think a big problem often is, and this happens a lot, especially in online coaching, is some people won't ever even talk to their coach. They won't even get on the phone with them. They'll email with them only, and they will never, and they'll just be given their macros, and then that's what they're supposed to do.
I did that with my coach in 2015 when I had a macro coach.
Yeah. And it's like, okay, well, technically what they're giving me would work, but what if this happens? What if this happens? What if I'm noticing I feel this way? And so I think like the macro aspect or the calorie aspect, we can't disprove. You need to be in a deficit if you want to lose weight. Like that needs to happen. Calorie counting is just one way you can actually get into a deficit. If you don't want to track calories, that's fine. You have to get to a level where you accept it's just going to take you a longer time, but maybe that works better for you. And that's fine too. So a lot of what I do with clients kind of based around this idea of like ACT, it's acceptance commitment therapy. So that really is working on like the acceptance of, look, it is what it is. Life is happening, but you can choose different decisions that are closer to what's of value to
like radical acceptance.
Acceptance is the answer.
Yeah.
Radical acceptance. Like
that's a big part of the Dopamine Nation book too.
And they say that in AA. When I first went, I remember them saying it's this acceptance is the answer. Like literally, you just accept that this is what it is.
100%. And there's like this concept of where if we look at like our emotions and our feelings, that's usually what's coming up for most people when they're eating and they're not actually hungry. It's this ability to distinguish whether we're hungry, bored, tired, or experiencing any other emotion. And a lot of people are so uncomfortable with riding the emotional wave, they think that the wave is going to be a typhoon and like wipe everything out.
So they make it out to be one then.
Yeah, when in fact it's actually like a 3-foot wave that will pass if you give it enough time. So what do we do with that time? So that's where the like behavior change and modification comes in. It's like, what are we doing that's productive within that time? It doesn't have to be working out. It could be doing Sudoku. It could be calling a friend. It could be like, I don't know, walking on a treadmill like Beth, you're doing, or I'm doing, like
you
Matt
are too,
going for a run. Right. So it's hard though. Because what it actually teaches you have to sit with the feeling.
Right.
Like you have to give it space to actually pass. And that's the big
why
thing.
People are turning to the food or alcohol.
And here's where I have an issue is pointing blame outside of yourself, right? Like the post I made today about taking accountability for your own actions. That's very hard for people to do, taking personal responsibility. So rather than taking personal responsibility, I'm going to blame the alcohol for all my issues. I'm going to blame the food. I'm going to blame my husband, my child, rather than taking accountability for, you know what? I got myself in this fucking situation. I need to get myself out.
Because nobody else will. Like, nobody's going to save anybody.
No. And you know what's so interesting? The percentage of people that when they remove like that addictive behavior, they suddenly find that oh, wow, I actually have like a depressive order. Oh, wow, I'm actually like bipolar. Oh, wow. Like all these other things come off and you can't blame those disorders on other people. You can see your situations for whatever they've been, but the choices you make are still your choices at the end of the day, which is kind of hopeful if you look at it from that
That's
point.
the thing.
It's like you're not lost.
I agree. Yeah.
It's just taking you a while to get back on course, but you're never truly lost. Right. So it's scary. Like life is scary.
It's hard. It's all hard.
And it also has so many amazing things in it, and you don't want to miss those things. So yeah, I mean, it's just such an interesting conversation to look at it from that point of view. Because I even think that people saying that they have X or Y, don't look at it from that point of view. Just like you said, it's like they look and they don't want to hear. And it's like you're just arguing in the comments with someone, and it's like they're not going to change. Like they're not right now.
Exactly.
Maybe later.
I don't know how many opinions I've changed in comments. I certainly know I've changed a lot of opinions, and just with repeated exposure to my content, and maybe one day it finally clicks in. But arguing with people, I don't think ever gets us to anywhere productive other than an outlet for us.
I do get so emotionally charged, especially when someone throws my past in my face, like someone did today.
This morning. Yeah,
like someone's like, I would never take advice from a ex crackhead or something like that. And I'm like, how nice of you. Like, yeah, I did mess
clearly
for 2
she
years.
was okay with it when
big fucking deal.
But when she was following you before, so but now you're talking about taking responsibility, she's not okay with it. Okay.
And then she said that maybe I should take responsibility for the fact that I ruined other people's lives by being an addict, like my husband's or my child, like type thing. And I was like, I do take responsibility for that. No one said I didn't. You know,
I mean,
but
you went through the program.
We're all okay. I went to AA. I got help. I had to do that for myself. No one fucking did that for me.
I think that's the hardest thing for anyone, whatever it is, whatever's going on in that person's life. Because clearly she wakes up or they wake up and someone's pissed in their Cheerios. Like it's not you. And it's so hard for someone to acknowledge that. It's hard to sit with that, whatever it is. And it's just, it sucks to watch. Because in some regard, like after all this therapy I've gone through and sobriety, it's like I feel bad. I feel bad for the person, whatever's going on. Like I feel bad. I know a part of me is like, no, I fucking don't want to feel bad, but I do feel bad. And it's even like when you have someone who comes to you and they're like, okay, I'm not losing weight. Clearly what we're doing isn't working. Like I need X or Y, lower my calories, do this. And you then have the conversation with them and it's like, okay, I believe you that you want to do this. And I also know we're probably not being accurate with things. So what can we do right now that's going to improve accuracy? Yeah. It's not a judgment on you. And I think that's where people get so wrapped up in fat loss, in health. It's a judgment on them if they can't do X or Y, but it's not.
It's not.
If you knew how to do it and actually do it, why the fuck would you hire a coach?
Right.
Like, why would you? I don't expect you to be perfect and never judge you if you make a mistake. I really don't.
That's why you're here. That's why you're with us. You know,
we want you to make mistakes as your coach. Like, please make all the mistakes you can when you're with us, because then you're going to be equipped to handle those situations when you're not with us. Like, coaching is just preparing people to be better, well equipped to handle setbacks. Really.
Yeah.
In my opinion, that's what I'm doing most of the time.
Take a look at the behaviors that got them to where they are. Like really shining a flashlight and having them figure that flashlight, where is it headed to?
Totally. So while we were talking about taking responsibility and stuff, and we were also talking about Dopamine, I just want to talk really quickly a few highlights if you're interested, Chris, because it's really great stuff what we're talking about here. So in Dopamine, the concept of being a victim refers to a mindset where individuals constantly perceive themselves as suffering due to external circumstances, blaming others for their problems and failing to take responsibility for their own actions, often leading to addictive behaviors as a way to cope with perceived pain rather than actively addressing the root issues.
Okay.
And I think that perfectly illustrates what we're talking about here.
Yeah. Yeah, it's this weird, it's like taking the inventory. You have to take an inventory and see what's gone wrong. I'll have clients do I call it a daily audit. Like they just literally will do a time audit, or they'll just do an audit of when they do X behaviors. And it's kind of shocking for them sometimes when they do that. And it's a strange place to be with all of that. Like to kind of sit in it. Like I tell them a lot, it's normal to sit in shit and get covered in it. Like, it's okay. Like, you have access to a shower, you can wash your clothes. It's not a permanent thing. And that's just it's so strange for a lot of people, and it makes them very uncomfortable. And I really like the idea of like, yeah, we taking ownership of whatever that is and being okay with the process it takes to get there. It's not going to be a straight line. It never is. Never.
Yeah. It's going to be uncomfortable. It's not going to be a cozy blanket.
I got a cozy blanket right now, but no,
it's going to be a burning inferno.
Everything's going to be on fire around you. It's going to feel like it, but that's usually life too. So we have to learn to manage those flames and keep them at a reasonable level, essentially.
Yeah. And I don't know what either of you call it within your coaching, but we do a whole thing called obstacle planning. And the reason why is because, and this is great, it's from, I don't know if you've ever had like Josh Hillis on your podcast. You totally
I love him. I know. Yeah. Totally.
He's the best. Yeah, he's like the best. And we were fortunate enough, he was able to mentor me a little bit when I was sort of kind of figuring this stuff out. But his book is awesome, and I highly recommend it for fitness enthusiasts, nutrition people, other coaches. It's called Eating Skills, like lean and strong. And it's like the psychology behind it. There's no calorie counting or anything. It focuses so much on specifically like 4 things. First are skills that happen while you're eating, and then skills that happen while you're not eating. So the skills would be like during a meal, recognizing you're full and stop eating. Between meals, it's being able to distinguish hunger from any other emotion, boredom. But for that, it's very advanced for people, like to suddenly be like, all right, I've been doing this for years. Let's suddenly use our mind to shut it off. So then he has like guidelines. And the guideline for during meals is like, eat balanced plates with healthy portions of protein and vegetables. And then between meals, it's like, don't eat anything 4 to 6 hours between meals, which is like, oh, okay, if I'm eating well-balanced meals, then that makes sense. I could do that. But the interesting concept he has is called obstacle planning, because what happens oftentimes is we'll be like, all right, I'm never doing that again. I'm never going to do this again. And that never happens.
Yeah. Usually do that thing. Don't do that thing that you've been trying to not do for the last 20 years. Okay.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Right.
But they're specific things. That's why they're obstacles. They happen again. So an example would be like at 2:00 when I go and get my coffee, there's always donuts in the break room, and I always grab a donut. Cool. We know the facts of why that's happening.
The obstacle.
We got to look at like, well, what happens right before that? And then when someone looks what happens before that, it's like, oh, I usually have to have a conversation with a coworker I don't enjoy talking with, and I'm stressed. I grab a donut. So then it's like, okay, what if we use this if-then concept? If this happens,
if this,
then I will.
Planning. Yes.
Right.
I'm familiar with that. Yep.
Right. So it comes, okay, it's I'm frustrated, then I will go get a drink of water. Then I will go look outside for 10 minutes. Then I will call a coworker that I enjoy talking to. It's like you have to kind of plug in all these different options. And you could have like 5 or 6 examples. You got to try it and see what works for you. But then you get messages from your clients. Like I got one before, and it was like, hey, he sent a box of Domino's pizza. And it's like, hey, guess who had pizza in the office, but didn't actually want it, and no one bent his arm to eat it? Me. So it's like, you know, it takes time. That's not something you get as quick as like, hey, all right, I should only eat this many calories today. Like that's a little easier.
250 pieces, a slice calories of pizza, right? Yeah.
Yeah. It's like that's helpful. But there's a lot of people who, even when they know that, they're not sure why they're making the choices they're making.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm
going to go back to the balanced plate and how important that is when you are a person that struggles maybe with overeating or over consuming sugar. And I think that is one kind of a big problem with people not eating balanced meals and then over consuming certain foods because of that. And then actually blaming the foods that they're eating. I'm addicted to sugar, but you're not eating proper balanced meals like protein, fats, and carbs. They're actually going to keep you satiated. It's going to help with your blood sugar and all that stuff. So I think that is so important for people to understand is the balanced plate. Number one, right?
If you're not building that balanced plate or you don't know how to, and you're just struggling with food addiction, quote unquote, like, let's, self-diagnose, let's start there.
Yeah. And it's like, even in that, it's like, okay, like 50, the goal is working up to a balanced plate. So it's not like I don't expect someone who's been eating like Pop-Tarts and like Cinnabon roll for breakfast every morning to suddenly be like, all right, I'm having a balanced plate.
Right.
No, I expect them to practice addition, which is like very often overlooked in nutrition. Like everyone thinks I just have to take things away. But if it's like, look, if you want a Pop-Tart, great. But let's get some extra fiber on that plate. Let's
Gosh, I have that conversation with my son almost every morning.
Oh,
just,
me too.
Just the Pop-Tart? Come on, man. Like, what can we do to make that a little bit better?
Yeah, so it's like, let's add a Greek yogurt to that. Cool. Yeah. Oh, you know what? Let's add this to that. And then they're like, well, I'm eating way more. I'm not finishing the Pop-Tart. And it's like, cool. Okay, what happens if I do this at my next meal? So it's like, I might have a client who spends a month. We might do like a 30-day challenge of like eating breakfast every day, like a balanced breakfast. And suddenly they start to make these other changes because it's like a cascade effect. So the concept of balanced plate is so important. And the pressure that someone puts on themselves to hit the balanced plate is also important too. Because it's like, well, what's a realistic expectation for myself?
Yeah. You got to meet yourself where you're at.
And that's hard for a lot of people.
It is.
Like,
it really is.
Because they compare to everyone else.
Because nobody wants to be where they're at. So
exactly.
So they don't want to meet themselves where they're at.
I want to get out as soon as possible.
Get me off this ride.
Right. Well, we need a little steps first, okay?
Yeah.
That's great. So I want to go back a little bit to what you were talking about with the Harvard food addiction scale, with the methodology, right? So the recall, right? And I think one thing I was thinking about this whole time was how when we ask, there's research to suggest this, people that say they only eat 1,200 calories a day and they can't lose weight, right? Well, when they do their dietary recall, that's what they're doing there. But when they're actually asked to track, they're doing something like 2,000 calories a day. So that was kind of my own little note there to that. And I'm sure like I've heard about the food addiction scale before, and everything you're saying is valid and checks out. But also there's the element of, well, people kind of just suck at it. And you mentioned that too. They're skewed about their previous, experiences and perhaps traumas and things like that.
Yeah. That is the one thing that like stood out for me the most, was how skewed it could easily be if someone was out of a clinical setting. Like in a clinical setting, if you're working with like an RD or a primary care doctor, they might be more quick to be like, that's probably not true. But if you're that's why these tools aren't necessarily meant for self-diagnosis.
Right.
And it's really important for other coaches to know this too. It's so out of our fucking scope of practice to give someone one of these and be like, all right, you clearly, but what's in your scope of practice is if you can Google this, it'll come up from PN. It's the modified Yale food addiction scale. You could give it to one of your clients or administer it together and have a conversation.
Yeah.
You could have a conversation about it, and you could also score them. And if they're scoring really high, you probably shouldn't be coaching them, and they should probably be talking to someone.
Refer out.
And this is where it's like a nice safety net. Also, let's say they're like in the middle of this score. You could be like, okay, it's clear that you're having some emotional eating tendencies and you don't have health promoting behaviors. We can totally work on that by looking at different eating skills we can apply to this. And then in like 3 months, you can have them do it again with you. And if you see an improvement, great. That means you're stepping in the right direction. If it stays the same or it's gotten worse, then you have to refer out. So it's like, it's a helpful tool in that regard. You can't really self-diagnose.
Right.
But like some of the questions are pretty, like, I ate to the point where I felt physically ill. So like, and then it's a scale. It's like less than
I've done that.
monthly, once a month, 2 to 3 times a month,
Who the fuck
once a week,
hasn't?
4 to 6 times a week.
Whenever me and Earl get together, we always do it at least once.
It goes from never all the way up to always. So it's like, okay, I'm going to completely be out there. It was just a holiday. Of course I did that. Like, I didn't feel great after, so then I didn't do it the next day. Someone else might just keep doing it. So there's a lot of these questions, and you can kind of see where it would give you like a nice insight. Like, I was so distracted by eating that I could have been hurt when driving a car, crossing the street, operating machinery. Like that's an extreme question, but that also falls in alignment with like food noise. So if it's like, if I'm always thinking about food, I can't shut that part of my brain off. And it's like, all right, you should probably talk to your doctor about that.
Yeah.
Totally.
I think it's important for people that are listening, please stop self-diagnosing yourself first. Okay. Because self-diagnosing yourself, that's kind of harmful. It doesn't really move you forward. if you really feel that you are struggling and that you may need help, you need to reach out to your doctor, a dietitian, a therapist, and get properly diagnosed before you diagnose yourself with binge eating or food addiction or whatever you feel that you may have.
Especially because, like you just said, with binge eating and things, like people so often describe themselves as a binger. I binge. It's
Right.
like, yeah, you're overeating. You had an overeating episode. Like, you're not binging. You're like, there's a clear difference. And that's why, like you said, it's so important to get an official diagnosis.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if you ever talk to someone who truly does suffer from binge eating disorder, their description of what they're eating like will blow you out of the water.
Oh yeah.
You'll think like, oh, I binged last night. I ate a pint of Haagen-Dazs. Cool. Someone else would say I had 3 pints of Haagen-Dazs. Then I went to Carl's Jr. I got like 12 cheeseburgers. I ate them in the seat. Then I did this. Then I did that.
Yeah.
All within like 3 or 4 hours.
Within a couple of hour period, there's that for sure. There's a criteria there. Yeah.
And it's almost like I hear it's like an out of body experience. It's one of those things that you're in it and you're doing it. And it's so extreme.
Yeah, it's like any other addiction. The number of times like I can remember drinking at a party and not realizing how much I was having because it would disappear and I just go fill up my glass again. Like it's a strange place to be because you don't think anything's wrong, or you do think something's wrong, and then you have this level of shame, level of shame where you're like, I can't do anything about this. It's a truly scary place probably to be for those individuals.
Totally.
Yeah.
So we were talking about Josh Hill. He sounds very interesting in some of his strategies, and I loved how you were talking about the balanced plate there too. A lot of the things he was talking about, there's a lot of mindful eating, a lot of mindfulness being applied there. Have you heard of something called the mindful eating plate?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
by Susan Albers, I believe, PhD.
Yeah. So
super cool.
His plate kind of looks like that too.
That's what I was visualizing when you were describing it.
So it's like 50% fruits or vegetables, like because for some individuals, no one wants to eat vegetables for breakfast. So we'll put fruit in that category. And 25% protein, 25% carb, and then like a thumb or two of fat. And that's like his version of a mindful, balanced plate. Yeah. And the cool thing is it can be scaled to whoever. Like that's like a base outline. Like if I have a male and he's like 230 pounds, there's no way 25% of his plate is going to be protein. It's going to be slightly bigger than that. And their carbohydrate intake might be a little bit lower. And their vegetable intake, like it's okay. You can skew it however you need to skew it. It's just to give you
That's where the trial and error and learning how it works for you, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just an outline. Like it's an outline for those who need to visualize more than those who can read it out and be like, okay, that's what it should be.
And as a plug for all of ourselves, this is also where a coach is really comes in handy to help you guide you through this and make sense of it,
Yeah.
I posted something earlier today on my Instagram story. I took a picture of my eggs I had, and I said, how many servings do you guys think this is? I was using the hand and fist method. So that's another cool strategy that for people to use to be mindful of their portions.
That's a good precision nutrition.
Yeah.
They have a lot of the infographics.
Precision Nutrition has a lot of great resources.
Yeah, they do. They really do. And they're public too.
They're free, they're public, and they're fairly accurate. Like, like they are fairly accurate, which is kind of cool. The nice thing is, like, you always have your hand, like, and it's based off your size.
Right.
So of course, someone who's 6'5" is going to have a bigger hand. They should be having bigger portions. That's just,
I love that because that's like a man versus a woman. It's naturally going to be different.
2 palms versus 1 palm for a woman.
Yeah, exactly. Men are going to need more protein, more calories, generally speaking. So that's where the hand portion is also individualized to you, and because it's like, how much protein exactly? Well, your protein, your palm and your protein right there. That's a good generalization. So.
And if you are working with a coach, I truly hope you realize that there should be more than one tool that they use to help get you to whatever your end goal is. We do basically like a values intake. We figure out what is most important and they're trying to start to bring out in themselves. And that helps inform like the decisions they make to get to that end point. A lot of people just stick to
I want to be in, this person does this.
Yes.
Yeah.
And when you reflect on that, it makes things not a lot easier, but a little more where you're like, oh, okay, in this situation, myself, I would totally eat the pizza and be okay without having a salad because I'm eating with my son and I don't have the time to make a salad, right? But in another situation when I'm by myself, it's like, no, stop being lazy, put the microwave vegetables in the microwave, get that with your pizza. It's like you both can coexist.
Right.
That's the important thing. You have to be flexible with your mindset around those things. And the value work can help with that. And it also informs, well, what skills are we going to use? Like for you, if you're someone who is not super analytical and numbers like just, they're too much for you, well, let's use like the plate method. Let's use like Jordan's thing and your thing, 3 plates and 2 snacks.
3 plates, 2
That's going to
snacks,
make so easy for someone to do. Wow, that sounds more manageable for me. Well, how am I going to track that? You're going to take a picture of everything you eat and just send it to me just for accountability. I'm not judging you what's on that plate. It's like, but you'll have added accountability. Great. They do that for like a couple of weeks and they're like, you know what? I'm tired of taking pictures. Cool. Let's just track protein. Oh, okay. Then they do that. They still send pictures sometimes, but they're tracking protein. Oh, all right. I want this to be, all right, let's add calories to that. Oh, it's like we have to have like these building blocks over time.
Yes. So right, Chris.
Someone else who has been doing this for a long time.
Yeah.
You know, I think people need to understand that too, that it's a process and it's not going to happen overnight because you're learning about yourself, the things that you never knew before. And that doesn't happen in a day.
And what you've done there too, right, is you've taught them all these skills along the way. That very first skill you started with, now they've got that to stack onto all those other ones. Now they've got what we like to call is like an emotional or a toolbox, just a toolbox, right? A skill toolbox, emotional toolbox. You have all these awesome tools to use in different situations.
And it's also like I could have someone who is a type A personality who has tracked their macros to a T, but they're not comfortable when they're like 5 to 10% off with that.
Yeah.
So then it becomes, all right, let's take 1 day a week where we're not tracking at all. And that's like, well, why would you do it? It's like, because you need to start to learn how to take the training wheels off. The goal isn't to diet forever. The goal is to get to maintenance and be really fucking glad you're there and be able to see what you're doing.
Maintenance is a great place to be.
Yeah.
Right. And I think a lot of people don't have that. Like naturally clients, like, they'll have maintenance periods when they go on vacation, when it's a holiday, when their kids are sick home from school.
But they're not
like
actually
it's natural,
intentional maintenance periods.
Right? They'll have this. So it's like there's 2 versions of the conversation you get to have. Number one is you're probably going to have to tuck your clients off a ledge when they're going on vacation and they can't work out and they're going to break their diet that they've been on. It's like, yeah, I don't want you to diet when you're on vacation. I don't want you to feel like you have to work out every day when you're on. You can if you want to, but it's really a time for you to reset. And you'll come back and you'll be dialed in when you come back. It's borrowed weight. It's just salt. You're probably not going to gain 10 pounds, right? And then there's the other conversation where it's like, we've been doing this a while now. It's been over like 16 weeks. It's time for us to take a maintenance break for like 2 weeks. Yeah. What does that mean? We're going to bring your calories up. Do I not have to track? No, I want you to track still so you don't go bonkers. But I want you to see you can add more to your plate. You're probably going to feel a little bit better. Your workouts are probably going to be better. Your sleep's going to improve. Like you're going to see all these benefits and you might not want to go back into a deficit. You might want to stay at maintenance for longer and that's fine too. So
yeah,
a lot of steps to it that I think sometimes people aren't aware of. And it really,
well, especially using the analogy of weight loss, fat loss, right? It's either you're dieting and you're not. That's why so many people suck at dieting. And
right.
Because you're either dieting or you're not. And
you're in the diet mindset, but you're actually not dieting. Like I've been doing this forever, but you haven't.
Yeah. Yeah. And Beth, I mean, what you're doing right now, I'm sure everyone listening to this follows you, but what you're doing right now is showing your actual, like you were in a deficit, you're at maintenance right now. You'll go into another cut before you take your rad bikini photo shoot, right? It's like, that's nutritional periodization. That's what it is.
Yeah.
Because you're not supposed to be dieting forever.
No.
You would be miserable. And hormonally, things would tank if you stick to that forever. You know, it's just not great. It's not how life's meant to be lived.
Right. And I'll be a year, like almost a year into maintenance before I even do this bikini thing. So it's like you have to give your body a break and be ready your body has to be ready to diet.
Yes. Yeah. And your mind has to be ready as well. Mind and body.
Yep.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Well said.
Such a great conversation, you guys.
I agree.
Oh, I enjoy talking to people. So this is great.
we haven't been doing a lot of guests recently either.
You're our first guest for a while.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. I feel very honored.
Yeah, it's been a couple months, I feel like, honestly. First one of the new year, that's for sure. And our goal of getting guests on here is just to get real people on and have real conversations. And this is we checked both of those boxes there.
Well, thank you. It was great to get to chat, and I don't know when this will come out, but with it being January right now and everyone's doing like crazy things, I just hope this is helpful for someone who's just feeling a little bit like they're treading water, you know.
For sure. It's been a lot of good golden nougats in here, and this episode will be coming out January 17th. So it's cool. It'll be coming out soon.
Yeah. Next Friday, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
We're stacking up episodes right now. I'm going to Mount Kilimanjaro in a couple of weeks. I'm leaving for Mount Kilimanjaro in 11 days. So can't record while I'm on a mountain. So here we are.
Yeah.
Not with that attitude.
I can record, but I ain't sending it anywhere unless I can get a pigeon to come get my phone.
A pigeon?
Why would
a pigeon? What is that? Pigeon mail, right? Yeah.
Oh my.
Chris, before we get going, what do you like to do? Like I know you're a family man, but like hobbies. What do you do?
I think hobbies for me, before kids, I was a huge like trail runner. I loved it. I loved doing all that. Yeah, it was something I got into it when I got sober is when I kind of got more into being outdoors a lot. Since having kids, a lot of my time is just like being a human jungle gym and playing with my kids. And I feel fortunate. I work from home. I'm doing my master's program online. Like I'm going to be home for a lot of this stuff. So for them, it's just being a dad. Like I love it. I never thought I would be like that into being a dad. I know that sounds weird to say, but I absolutely love it. I also do music stuff, comedy stuff. Like I love helping people. Like
we're well versed.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, so there's just a bunch of stuff I like to do. Mainly if I could do something, it would be sitting on the couch watching Silo on Apple TV with my wife. Like if I could do that,
any good?
It's so good.
I've never even heard of it.
It's got so many good shows.
It's so good. I hadn't heard of it either. My sister-in-law recommended it, but she was like, but you got to make it through the first couple episodes. It took about 6 episodes to get really good, which I was like, I don't have time for 6 episodes, but we made it work.
Now you're
hooked. now it's just so good.
Is it Silo? Silo?
Yeah, it's based on like a book series.
Oh.
I'll have to check it out. I had my eye on it for sure.
Oh, it's so good. So like doing that and just shutting my brain off is like something I feel like ever since starting my own coaching business and then just social media, like it's hard to shut my brain off.
Yeah,
it's so hard. So I just look for things that, and I know it's not like mindful or whatever, but I think in a way it is, where you just like have the chill out time and you're not
absolutely. I think you're very intentional with it. I would agree. That's mindful. Yeah. And you have hobbies, and I think that's also something we need for our clients to do. And if we're struggling, if we're struggling with mood issues and having poor relationship with this type of stuff, like hobbies, fill your time with things that you enjoy. Practice something for self-care. Take a downtime where you just shut your brain off. That's very mindful. That's self-care.
Yeah.
People need to practice that more.
Yeah. Yep. It's so strange too. I don't know if you guys have noticed this. Like I tend to work with a lot of moms, and like they're the number one group of people who have a hard time taking time for themselves.
It's the mom guilt.
Like it's just next level. I watch it with my own wife. It's just when I'm like, take time, she's like, what do you mean take time? And I'm like, just go outside. She's like, what? What's going to happen? I was like, nothing. That's okay. So it's like, there's a big conversation that should be had about that for anyone. It's okay. Right. It's okay to do nothing sometimes. That's when the best stuff happens, actually.
Yeah. We have a saying in our program, self-care isn't selfish. Self-care is self-preservation.
Right.
And we work with so many, mothers and grandmothers that are struggling with that same idea. And they put everybody else first their entire life. And so that idea is very foreign to them. It makes them feel very uncomfortable. What do you mean I should go get a manicure? What do you mean? Like makes me uncomfortable.
Yeah. And then that's why they self-soothe with other things like food and alcohol.
Because they're not taking care of themselves in other ways.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Been there.
Exactly.
Been there.
Yep. What a banger of a talk.
What a banger.
Banger.
Chris, thank you so much for coming on and chatting with us. Where can everyone reach you if they want to find you?
Yeah, the place I'm most active is on Instagram. So it's at Coach Chris McMahon. You can find me there. My website is the same name, chris-mcmahon.com. So yeah, that's where everyone can find me. I'm pretty friendly. Matt knows if you follow me, I'll send you a video message just to say hi.
Yeah, man, I wanted to shout you out for that. I told Beth about it. I was like, dude, I followed Chris, and a couple minutes later, he sent me a video back and said he's looking forward to meeting me and everything. I was like, man, that really impressed me. Like, I've never gotten that before, so that was cool.
I'm a social butterfly. I am a like introverted extrovert. If I could be by myself, I totally would, but I try as much as I can to like be out and say hi.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm pretty friendly.
Nice.
Right on, man. Well, it's been great chatting with you and meeting you.
Thank you, guys.
Hope you enjoyed this episode, so why not share with a friend who needs to hear it? Send us a DM on Instagram or email us at cutthecrappod@gmail.com and join our Patreon at patreon.com/cutthecrappodcast. As always, we appreciate you and thanks for being here.